everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of On the Bluff. Sorry, like I just cut out there.
No, you're not. You're good. You're good.
Right.
You're
Anyways, I'm your host, Christian Fowler. Joining me, as always, my co-host, Gabe Coombe. Gabe, what is up, brother, and how are you doing?
I'm kind of, wallowing in my own misery. I had a serious, we record on Monday, so we are talking right now on Monday. I had a serious case of the Mondays, and it had to do with what we saw on Saturday. And then now, no Pac-12, movement. Memphis is staying in the All-American Athletic Conference, so I'm kind of wallowing in my own misery on this Monday. I hope you're ready to bring some energy, because I don't quite have it like I normally do, man.
Yep, I can bring a little bit of energy tonight, but it is going to be one of our more depressing episodes. Right. It's not going to be as exciting as last week's or the weeks before that, so it's going to be a little sad boy episode for us this week.
Somebody cue Marvin's Room by Drake or something.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like we need to cue something sad.
Any news and notes from the weekend, Gabe?
I went to a birthday party on Saturday, and that birthday party is one of my good friends, and it was he's a big Memphis fan, so we planned the whole thing around that 2:30 game that Memphis and Navy played. So it was a fun party, but that sort of put a damper on it. But other than that, I stuck around the house and chilled. I
bet you can't guess where I was this weekend.
You were in Oxford, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. Look at you.
Yeah, they handled business pretty 56-13 over old Georgia Southern.
Yeah, and let me tell you how incredible my girlfriend is, right? So we go.
You suck up. You're a suck up.
I'm
not.
Look
at you,
she ain't listening.
Unreal.
We're just talking amongst ourselves. She's not listening.
Last time when I talked to her, when I met her, she said she has heard and listened sometimes to the pod.
Sometimes, but since she started school, she's had no time to listen. So I know she's not going to hear this. So this is just purely for the truth of the matter. So her family.
She's so great. She's the greatest thing ever. Your girlfriends and wives couldn't even hold a candle to her. Look at you.
Didn't say that. You want me to not tell you now?
No, tell me. I'm sorry. I'm done giving you shit.
So her parents are season ticket holders for Ole Miss. So we go to tailgate, and she's like, you know what? We played Georgia Southern. We've been here for 3.5 hours. Let's just go back to the house and watch Tennessee, Oklahoma instead of watching Ole Miss smack Georgia Southern. So we left at like 6:15, 6:20, got back to the house and watched the entire Tennessee-Oklahoma game. And she went and got us Chick-fil-A, and we ate dinner and drank milkshakes and watched Tennessee-Oklahoma. So that was that was about it from the weekend. And then watched football all day Sunday, like normal people do on Sundays. But that's it. That's it for me. So
there you go. All right, milkshakes and Chick-fil-A while watching the Vols game. I know you were in heaven, man. You were loving life.
That's great. I had pretty much all my favorite things there. But Memphis did not take care of business against Navy, as you've alluded to a couple of times. Memphis 3-0 going in this game, coming off of the big win in Tallahassee against Florida State. I think I said it on here last week. I said it on your show last week on 92.9. If Memphis can go into Tallahassee and beat Florida State, albeit a not great Florida State team who finally won a game this weekend against Cal, if they can do that, they should be able to relatively easily go to Annapolis and beat Navy. And if you would have told me beforehand, if you would have said, okay, going in this game, Memphis is going to lose, I would have said it was ugly, penalties, untimely turnovers, sloppy offensively, just overall sloppy game. Navy made them play, their kind of game, slow down the clock, not enough possessions for Memphis to do what they needed to do, and it's like a 13-10 or 13-6 game. Instead, Memphis went up to Annapolis and lost in an absolute track meet against Navy, in which their quarterback, Blake Horvath, had over 400 all-purpose yards and 6 touchdowns and averaged nearly 20 yards per carry. I couldn't believe it. I didn't get to watch a ton of it because, like I said, it was tailgate and I was in the Grove, but there were some TVs around that had it on, so I was catching it occasionally, but the more I saw, the more I wanted to turn away from it because it was horrible. I mean, every time pretty much Navy got the ball, they were going either straight down the field in a couple of plays or straight to the end zone on one play.
Yep.
And this is coming off the heels of a ton of praise that has been heaped on Jordan Hankins and this defense for what he's done in his first year as a defense coordinator at the University of Memphis, for the talent that they brought in, for what seemed like a culture shift on this defense to being more of a nitty-gritty, hard-nosed, in-your-face, swarm-to-the-ball defense, and moving away from the days of what we saw on Saturday, which was just no resistance, straight down the field. It was embarrassing. I mean,
yes, it was.
This was an embarrassing loss against an inferior team on the road.
Couple of things. Blake Lamar Jackson Horvath. I got to tip the cap to the guy. He was great. But for the love of everything, they couldn't tackle the guy.
No.
And then there was that, like the lack of like situational understanding to let him at the beginning of the fourth quarter. They're up 42-30, and Memphis punts it back to them, and he takes 1 yards out into the end zone. You're like, dude, you get not just the lack of adjustments at halftime, but the lack of like understanding of the situation and being able to make timely stops. It just blew me away. Last week, we praised them rightfully for one of the best defensive performances we've seen in the past decade of Memphis football. And then this week, this is one of the worst I've seen. And I've played with some horrible defenses. I mean, I have to go back to against Navy, like probably 2015, last time I saw a defense this terrible against, and they weren't prepared against a Navy offense, but at least that day it was strictly triple option. They would get to third down and just convert every time. And they possessed the ball for 40 some odd minutes. Memphis won the time of possession in this game because Navy was the more explosive team, and they just found a way to consistently get their playmakers into space. And Memphis's defense was not ready to tackle. They weren't ready to play assignment football, and that's what you get. You get slapped and kicked directly in the teeth. But here are the stats that blow me away. 10.7 yards per play. That's what Navy got on Saturday.
Insane.
Blake Horvath, you said almost 20 yards per carry, 17.6 yards per carry, 16 yards per pass play. He was 9 for 12 for 192 yards and 2 TDs there. I understand it was a different Navy look, but it shouldn't be that much different. Yeah. And then here's the stat that I just cannot get over.
Yeah, this one's absolutely wild.
Memphis gave up 7 touchdowns to Navy's offense. Memphis only forced 6 third downs. Navy had more touchdowns than third down attempts. That tells you on first and second down, they were pacing it, and they were consistently they weren't just on schedule, they were ahead of schedule the entire game. And that's just, to me, inexcusable, because when you go into playing a Navy team, the one thing you'll talk about in the broad scheme of how you're going to defend them is keeping them off schedule. They were ahead of schedule the whole day, and that's why they gave up. The Tigers gave up, 49 points? 49 points defensively. Then they had the pick 6. And then the other part that just really tears your heart out at the end. It's like you score, you come back from 49-30 with 8 minutes and left. You are within 5 points, 49-44. You get the onside kick. You drive down to the 25-yard line, and you're thinking, oh, my God, they might steal one. It feels like we're getting away with murder. I cannot believe this is about to happen. And, what you lean on usually is like, well, we have an experienced quarterback. He can come through. He can come through here. He did it last year in the North Texas game, done it several times before. He's not going to make some type of crazy mistake. He forces it into double coverage. Guys Navy defender catches it, takes it for 6. And I'm just hoping for a flag at that point. I'm like, God, this is nuts. But they were resilient, I will say, at the very end. It never got to that point. Very, very frustrating loss. And definitely ruined my Saturday. I'll say that much.
Yeah, it's like you said, a couple of adjectives to describe it: inexcusable, embarrassing. All these things are 100% true. And I think me and Kenny were talking about it pre-show, which for the audience, you will not be seeing Kenny on here tonight because he's having some internet troubles. But we were talking about it before we jumped on, and it's like, is this the worst loss or most embarrassing loss of the Silverfield era? And the only other one that I could think of was the 49-10 loss against Cincinnati. But Cincinnati was the top 10
But you knew
team
you were
in the
going to
country.
lose that game.
Exactly.
You
Top
know?
10 team in the country. They were loaded. Desmond Ritter, Jerome Ford, Alec Pierce. And that's just offensively. That's not even mentioning like Ivan Pace on defense, who's been killing it with the Minnesota Vikings. But that was a game you were expected to lose. Even think about the Missouri game. They were competitive in that game against Missouri. Boise State, who they played last year, they won that game. So it's really like the Temple loss. And that I think that was the 2020 year also, if I'm not mistaken, and the Cincinnati loss against the top 10 team. So disappointing and embarrassing. I think this takes the cake for both of those in the Ryan Silverfield era. And embarrassing is one thing, right? An embarrassing loss is one thing, but a disappointing loss is something completely different because we see this team. If they're going to drop one of these early season games, it's got to be against Florida State, right? Even going into it, they're not good, but some of the circumstances that we mentioned, you're not thinking it's coming against Navy.
Yeah, you got trapped by the trap game. Like you knew it was coming, and you got trapped. And I don't know. It's just coming off that win last week to where we are now, thinking about what the actual expectations need to be the rest of the way. Completely different conversation altogether. Yeah. You gained yourself a little bit of wiggle room with the win over Florida State. You lost it all the next week against a team that going into the game, you were a 9.5 point favorite over. And now, like looking forward, what do we think? Like, obviously, the AAC championship stuff is still out there, but now you have to rethink what you think about that game on the road against South Florida and on the road against Tulane, maybe against UAB at home. Yeah, you have to rethink all these things. So, I mean, everything still seems to be on the table. College football playoff, I'd put a hardcore pause on that.
Big pause.
But you have things out in front of you that you can accomplish, but my expectation of them accomplishing them it's way lower than it was a week ago. And has nothing to do with the offense. Offense played fine. Again, 656 yards of total offense. Seth Hennigan maybe wasn't efficient, but he did put up 360 some odd yards passing. They ran for 200 some odd. They had 200-yard rushers. They had 200-yard receivers. So it has nothing to do with the offense. Now I'm looking directly at the defense, and I hate to say it, it's always the defense. It's always the defense. Every single, even when we think we have like this glimmer of hope, the defense finds a way to just yank that away from us. Nope, you're gonna have to worry about us all year.
Yeah, and it's really here we go again, and it's to compound it even more. Like if you go back to last week and you read what people are saying, national analysts and pundits are saying about the University of Memphis, it's that they are bar none the team in the driver's seat for the college football playoff bid. And with all that riding, you can't just go lay an egg in Annapolis against a not extremely talented team. I mean, Memphis allowed more points to Navy than Bucknell and Temple, who Temple is one of the worst teams in the entire country.
Yep.
And they allowed double, I believe, yards per carry to Navy than Temple or Bucknell did. And that's embarrassing and disappointing.
But here's the thing that what bothers me about that's not I don't even know, like watching it, some of it was scheme. They got out schemed by Navy because Navy had the bye week, but you expect that. A lot of it though, it was readiness. They weren't ready to put their head down and go make a bunch of tackles in assignment football. Like that's the problem I have with the defensive performance. A lot of it was just missed tackles, blown assignments. And you just can't have that against anybody, much less Navy. Navy's the one team on your schedule where it's like, we have to play boring, disciplined football, unfortunately. And they just couldn't do it.
Yeah, and the weird thing about this game, and we'll move on because there's no need to keep hounding on this. So
I want to get to an injury update though once you get done.
Yes, once we get done with this, we'll get to that. If there was ever a year it felt like Memphis would have been prepared personnel wise for Navy, it was this year. When you look at what they have in Chandler Martin and what they brought in that linebacker room, even though there's been some attrition in that room still. I think we felt pretty confident in what they could do. So that just another layer on it is you feel like if you have the linebackers to fill those gaps and to be in those holes and make those tackles, then it's exactly like you said you should be able to keep them off schedule, and it didn't happen. So there's so many layers of just disappointment to this game, and as you kind of talked about, Memphis, their margin of error shrunk. Plus, like I said, plus some, because if you lose to Florida State, you're losing to an out-of-conference team, but losing in embarrassing fashion to an in-conference team, your margin for error at this point is pretty much zero. And I think you summed it up perfectly. How can we feel confident about them beating South Florida and beating Tulane if they can't go on the road in Annapolis and beat Navy? And I don't think we can at this point. I think at this point, like you said, the college football playoff stuff, that is completely for the time being.
Let it go.
At best on pause, and at worst completely out the window. Because can you really expect this team to go win 8 consecutive games now? I just don't think that's realistic at this point. Can things change? Of course. Look how much.
And by the way, it would be 9 consecutive games because of the AAC championship.
Correct. And so things change quickly. Look at the difference between how we're talking about this team last week and this week, but we'd have to see some very impressive stuff for them to even remotely get back into that conversation.
Well, good news, though, coming up this week, you have Middle Tennessee State, and they're bad. They're really bad. Good get-right game back at home, so hopefully they can get right and then get ready before the bye week, then they'll have South Florida. So, still opportunities out there for them to take advantage of, but I don't blame anybody. You're probably right there with me. I don't have near enough confidence that they can get through the rest of this schedule unscathed, even though I had plenty of confidence last week. Now, we do have some injury updates. Elijah Herring, new linebacker coming over from Tennessee, when he's played, been really good. He's still day-to-day. He's missed the last 2 games. And then Rock Taylor and Kobe Drake both went out and they were both 100-yard receivers, both went out with an injury during the Navy game. I think they both came back at some point, but they're banged up, and they're going to be considered day-to-day, still being evaluated. So they did say, this was the staff saying and Ryan saying, they don't expect any of these guys to be out long-term, but these nicks and bruises are going to start adding up even more, and it's only going on to game 5. So you got to take advantage of the bye week after Middle Tennessee State to get guys back healthy and back on the mend. Yeah,
for sure. All right, Gabe, segue us into our next topic.
All right. You want me? How am I going to segue? Last week we talked about the Memphis Pac-12 idea, and we knew that Memphis was going to come up with a decision. I had Ross Dellinger, who's been reporting, the main reporter on this from Yahoo Sports. I had him on Friday, and he told me it was going to be a lot more complicated than just a no-brainer. And I know we talked about it last week, almost in the light of it being a no-brainer, as long as the finances can make sense.
Yes.
Well, seemingly the finances didn't make sense. And Memphis did not end up in the Pac-12. They recommitted to the American Athletic Conference alongside all the conference mates that the Pac-12 was trying to poach, which was South Florida, UTSA, and Tulane. They all stayed back with Memphis. Memphis was supposedly the linchpin. If they would have left, all of them would have left. But since they didn't, they all stayed back. And, my question always was, if you're going to get out of the American, you're going to have a buyout or an exit fee, and you're going to have to deal with $2.5 million more per year in travel expenses. And are you going to be able to, if you have those expenses, be able to make it up with the new TV deal that the Pac-12 is ultimately going to strike? Or we'll see what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it came to be where they didn't feel like they could make up that ground even with a new TV deal in the Pac-12. So it keeps them in the American. And I think ultimately, you've been reading the same reports as me, Christian. This came down to a $25 million plus exit fee that the Pac-12 was not willing to give you much on. They weren't willing to help as much as you originally thought.
Well, I think it was $2 million is what.
$2.5 million is what they were willing to put down.
Yeah, so it kind of in the same vein as the Navy game. Like it's very disappointing in a sense. I mean, obviously, you don't want to force an issue like this and end up in a bad position. So I think if all those numbers are correct, I believe they did make the correct decision, because that's just not something financially that the university can take on. And
yeah.
even the extra travel expenses are one thing, but the buyout is massive. And with not having anything in place as far as TV goes for the new look Pac-12, it's just not a risk you can really take. So it's completely understandable. It is a little bit disappointing because you would like for Memphis to be able to get out of the American, and also the best teams in the American come with them to join other really solid group of 5 teams. So it would have been, I believe, a great situation for Memphis and the other teams in the American that were leaving, obviously not the teams that would have been left over. But it's the decision that they had to make. They did not want to hinder themselves financially. So that's a completely understandable decision. So with all of that, where does Memphis go from here? Like, do you see is there any way that there's a light at the tunnel? I know the ACC stuff has been kind of a talking point that you and I have discussed as well. Do you think Memphis ever makes it out, or are they trapped here now?
They're trapped at least for the next 5 years while the grant of rights is going on. And what I can say is control what you can control. Be good on the field. And then in 5 years, if the ACC loses a couple members and they need to backfill, hey, you may be there. But then in the end of the day, you do have to ask yourself about joining that conference, which you would without question pay whatever it is to go get into the ACC. But if they do lose members, you have to ask yourself what their TV deal is going to look like, and if that's going to benefit you long term, or is this going to be another Big East situation where you fold in on yourself and you lose more members to bigger and better conferences, and you end up on the outside looking in again. So I think that's the aspirational idea. And it sounds like people behind the scenes are confident that they can get this program and this athletic department to a point where that becomes a reality. But I still think you're sitting at the poker table with 6 or 5 other programs and you're waiting for the best hand. That's all you're doing right now. You're still, it was going to be a gamble no matter what. Because the Pac-12 doesn't have a TV deal right now, and they need 8 members to even negotiate that. Yeah. But if you're staying behind, you're still gambling as well that maybe one day we'll get the invite elsewhere. Now, when it comes to like not joining the Pac-12, the only reason it does frustrate me is from a competitive standpoint. That's it.
Yes.
I get the financial reasons. I think they made the right decision, honestly, financially, because the Pac-12 wanted to talk you up as like, oh, we love you, man. We really want you to come down. Come on. But then the money didn't back up the love that they were speaking. Right. So I always think actions speak a whole lot louder than words, and actions spoke a lot louder than words in this situation. But if it was just a competitive decision, like if you were just making this decision off of competition, you would have left yesterday. You would have left last week as soon as you got word from it. But that's not how this works. In the end of the day, Memphis is a working class city. I think they're a little too overextended with their main corporate donor, FedEx. FedEx is probably not willing to go pay $25 million to get you into a Pac-12 that's just a slight upgrade. They're probably waiting more aspirationally for a power conference. So and already they've got $50 million on the renovations and $25 million on the NIL deal. So it just, the money was never going to be able to work out if you're putting up $25 million to get out of the damn American Athletic Conference. And I'll give him and Tim Pernetti some credit. He kept that damn buyout high, that exit fee high for a reason. And the other part of this, look at the Pac-12 now. They're kind of, as much as people wanted to get frustrated that Memphis didn't go and no one else went, UNLV said no to them. San Jose State said no to them. Tulane, Memphis, UTSA, USF all said no to them. And I think the only yes they've gotten is Utah State on top of the original 6. So it's like they're now shopping for the freaking, they're in the scrap aisle. They're looking at the New Mexico States of the world and the UTEPs and shit like that. So, in the end of the day, I know it hurts right now, but I think long term, this was probably the best financial decision for Memphis. As bad as I, hate the fact that you have to stick in the American. The American stinks. I still stand by that. That's about last week. I still stand by the fact that the American is one that you get out of whenever you can.
Yeah, no, whatever I'm trying to say.
Unarguable.
Unarguable. There you go. I don't know why I couldn't pull that one out. Unarguable point that you made. But I think you brought this up last week, and you were like, well, what if Memphis ultimately makes this decision, go to the Pac-12, and then the ACC stuff does come to fruition? Then how stupid do you feel, or how left out do you feel that you finally could have made that jump to a power conference and ultimately decided to take that slight upgrade and it didn't pay off long term? Now, kind of looking glass half full here, because who knows if that will ever happen. But I think that is probably one of the best avenues to look at this decision as, if they're not going to go to the Pac-12, at least it leaves them open to the potential of still having that Power 4 conference. And if they were able to do something like this college football playoff, if they were able to continue making strides, then it's on the table. Now, is it ad nauseum to keep talking about this and keeping your fingers crossed and keep hoping that one day it's going to happen? Yes, it is. It's frustrating for us.
It's brutal.
Sure
it's brutal. It's terrible.
It's brutal. It's tough. It's tough when you have been left out multiple times and then you finally see a little pinhole at the end of the tunnel and it doesn't work out. Then it's extremely disappointing. And then you kind of have to jump right back into the wave of, can this happen? Will this ever happen? So I know it's got to be extremely aggravating, extremely frustrating for Memphis fans, especially when you have no control. And I'm not talking about obviously fans don't have any control, but even the university doesn't have any control over if someone else, if another conference decides they want them. And it goes back to what you say and what we've said the entire time when it comes to conference realignment. All you can do is the little bit of things that you can do.
Whatever you can control.
Yeah, you're on the field, you're on the court, you're on the whatever playing surface product that you put out there. Yeah, fundraising, getting money into the program, upgrading facilities, upgrading stadiums, all these things. So it sounds disgusting because we keep saying it, but they're doing all the right things. Like they're doing everything they can. Does it ever happen? Who knows? Who knows?
So on the idea of silver linings, I only have one silver lining staying in the American. The ESPN deal is okay. And that look-in deal that could come in 2026 where people were speculating that money would go down. Apparently in the contract, as long as they have the same membership, which they should have by the time they get to 2026, it can only go up. Now, I don't expect it to go up either. I think it'll be right around the same, 8-9 million per school, however it works out. So I think the best thing, though, is, the Pac-12 doesn't have a TV media rights deal. Did you want to be the guinea pig for a TNT deal or whatever, or Warner Brothers Discovery deal? Probably not. You still have ESPN, you still have visibility, and that's the only silver lining I really have from this whole thing. Now, can I ask you this? And I'm kind of tired of all the speculation, but think about this. Mountain West now has 7 members because Utah State left to go to the Pac-12. But you know what Utah State became? The 7th member of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
So now you have 2 West Coast conferences with 7 members. You know what would have been the easiest decision to make that may ultimately have to be made?
Merge them.
They should have merged from the beginning, but it feels like Washington State and Oregon State were a little too proud to do that.
Right.
It would have cost no money for anybody. There would have been no exit fees paid. But it is kind of a mess. The Pac-12, people were giving them a lot of credit for trying to stay alive last week. They've created a freaking problem out on the West Coast.
Yeah, which after how it all unfolded shouldn't be extremely surprising. But once again, everybody was
still expecting. I know it's kind of a joke, but I'm still half expecting for, the Pac-12 powers that be to send Ed Scott and Bill Hardgrave a "you up" text at some point this week.
Yeah,
if they don't get another member to join, or at least a good member, give them the "you up" text and say, "Hey, well, that $2.5 million we were talking about with the exit fees. What do you think about $15 million? Would that change your mind if you only had to pay 10 out of pocket?"
And what do you think if that's the case? You do it
at that point, but 2.5 was. Can we be honest? 2.5 was disrespectful. That was fucking that was an unserious offer. Is what it was.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Speaking of silver linings, we don't have one for the Hot 3 because unfortunately, none of us get to hang out with Kenny Stubblefield tonight with his continued malfunctions and issues because of the city of Collierville and whatever issues they're having. But anyway, me and Gabe are going to try to lock it in for the hot three. So we'll be back on the other side with just me and Gabe. No Kenny bringing you the hot three.
Tier 6, middle of the road. Number 18, Jason Kidd of the Mavericks. 17, Taylor Jenkins of the Grizzlies. 16, Quinn Snyder of the Hawks. And 15, Michael Malone of the Nuggets.
How was Quinn Snyder in with those other three people?
I don't know. That's a good question. How did that come about?
You're talking about three coaches whose teams were number one in their conference at some point in time, whose teams went deep into the playoffs.
Tune in to the Night Court Podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
We didn't need to make a splashy move, man. I mean, you can check my Twitter feed anytime you want, man. I have been on the side of this is a very good team as constructed. This is a team that's going to be a threat to host or be in the Western Conference Finals. Mm-hmm. This is a team that has a very high potential as constructed, right? And some of these fools get on here and talk about, oh, we didn't make a move, we got worse, this, that, and the other. I would have. Some team, that's crazy, man. And like sometimes adding makes your team worse. Like you got a locker room cancer, like, you know, somebody that comes in and messes with the young core. And just because you made the splashy move, your team might be worse.
Why would you make changes to a team that you haven't even seen yet? Like we haven't seen we haven't seen Marcus Smart play with these guys. We haven't seen Vince. We haven't seen Gigi. Haven't seen Edie.
That's it, man.
This is a version of the Grizzlies we've never seen. Like even if you take the whole Edie part out, the Marcus Smart, Vince Williams, Gigi with Ja Jaren and Bane, we haven't seen that.
Yeah.
So why are we let's see what that looks like, you know, before we do anything.
Tune in to the Anthony Sane Show Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
We are officially back. Kenny list for the hot three.
Kenny list.
Are you feeling okay? Are you feeling okay about it, or are you a little nervous about it?
Man, I'm a little nervous for it.
How dare y'all?
What was that? Is he here?
I can hear him.
Do y'all think y'all are gonna do this without me? Do y'all think
I was
you're gonna do this without me?
The WWE intro style this week with Kenny. Kenny's here.
I was low key happy.
I'm happy now. I feel like the show is going to be complete this week.
By the will of this and this, I brought the internet back from Cardinals. Substation malfunction last night, baby.
Good to see you, brother. Damn.
I feel like he's doing all this, and then it's going to go out again.
It might. It might, like right there. Look, it's pausing. Look, his face is paused on the screen. Oh, he did all this for nothing, dude.
All right,
well, Kenny. While we still have you, get us.
I don't think we have him.
He's so in and out. This is brutal.
All right, Kenny, you might have to jump out and let us handle this.
Yeah, jump out, Kenny.
Jump out, Kenny. We will handle it. We appreciate your, like Gabe said, your WWE intro is awesome while it lasted.
But it was for nothing. It was for absolutely nothing at the end of the day. All right, Christian, what we got?
All right, we are going into the hot three now. Let's start with college football week 4 and not talk about Memphis anymore. A lot of interesting games this week. We finally got into a little bit of the meat of the schedule with some of the conference games starting. So we finally had some ranked matchups. Most of them weren't great, but we did have some decent upsets this week. Where do you want to start? We'll do the same thing we had the last couple of weeks. We'll do 3 disappointing teams and 3 teams we were excited about this week.
All right, I don't even want to do it that formal.
That's
Let's
fine.
not even do it that formal. I want to start on Friday, though. Can we start on Friday?
Yes,
because Nebraska and Illinois played that night. Nebraska's at home. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Dylan Rayola's running out there doing his Patrick Mahomes cosplay, which is getting weird at this point.
It is weird.
I know he's 18 years old, still really,
It's weird.
really weird. Like
Yeah.
we can admit that. Don't
And
care how young he is.
Time out. Denying it is even more weird.
Yes, yeah, it's very weird.
Admit
It's
it.
very weird. Now, Illinois ended up winning that game in OT, and
Yeah.
Nebraska drops to 9-33 over their last whatever the hell number that is in
34.
one-score games. And what blows my mind more than anything is if I'm a Nebraska fan, it's like I sit there through the first three quarters just about against anybody in the country. Like when Lincoln Riley was at Oklahoma, they played close with them.
Yep.
Ohio State, they've played close with them in the past. They play close with Michigan and Penn State. Like whoever they're playing, even in conference, they usually play close through three quarters. But that big, bad fourth quarter is always on the way, brother. And they literally piss down their leg every fourth quarter against a team with a pulse. Dylan Raiola, we should have seen it as an omen at the beginning of the fourth quarter when he fumbled twice and they landed on top of him and didn't get a takeaway. But we're like, okay, that's fourth quarter execution. That's the Nebraska I know and love.
Yeah.
And then they go down, they have a field goal to take the lead. They blow it completely. Yep. Then they get to overtime, 4 straight sacks, get the hell out, you're done. Game over. It was Nebraska. It's the Nebraska I've grown to know and love in the Big Ten. It was hilarious.
And I will say, like, Nebraska's been down for a minute after, really historically in college football being one of the best programs of all time. And if you're our age, Gabe, like, you don't know that unless you are a big-time college football fan. I know they had a little bit left in the early 2000s. I think they went and played in the national championship against Miami maybe in 2001, if I'm not mistaken. But they just have not been the program they once were. But Matt Rule is a well-known program builder. He's done it everywhere that he's been at the collegiate level, not in the NFL. And I think Dylan Raiola is really, really good.
Well, but it's kind of funny. It doesn't matter who the coach is, who is playing, who they're playing, whether it's home or away. It doesn't matter who the president is, who the governor of the state of Nebraska is. Doesn't matter, if Kanye West is sane or insane. They're still going to screw up in the fourth quarter. That's just who they are.
But but in their defense, once again, they do not have the talent level of one of the top teams in the country yet. And I think they'll get there. I really do. I think a couple more, maybe one more, two more recruiting classes, I think they'll have the talent. Now,
Scott Frost, it's not like Scott Frost wasn't a program builder. I know it was a short stint at UCF, but they went from 0-12 to 12-0 or 13-0 2 years later.
Yeah.
And he was a native-born son. Like, it's just, as much as I want to believe in Matt Rule, and I think that he can do it, I thought that about Scott Frost.
But they never looked this good under Scott Frost.
I get it, but the same ultimate issues.
Yes. Yeah.
Derailed them every single week.
We'll see if they ever flip it around. Let's talk a little UT Oklahoma, and the biggest game of the weekend. College game day was in Norman. It was a big time game, and if you were expecting the fireworks that this game could have produced on paper, it was not that game. It was a time of possession, control the clock, play defense game. Jackson Arnold, former 5-star, gets benched right before halftime, doesn't come back in. They turn it over to I think he's true freshman.
Yep.
Michael Hawkins.
3-star, friggin' 3-star.
Yeah. What'd you think of this game? Tennessee looked dominant for the majority of it.
Yeah, Oklahoma just had like the score in the fourth quarter to make it look somewhat close.
Right.
That's really what it was. But for a majority of the game, they had 3 on the board. What really blew me away is the reason I'm going to put Tennessee, even though they didn't run away with the game and make it look unbelievably good with their offense, I think they left some points out there. I'm putting Tennessee in my title contender conversation just because defensively they look great. Everybody keeps telling me that their secondary is gettable, and I think down the stretch of the season, when they get more into the heart of their SEC schedule, because they do have Alabama and Georgia, they may get got. Their secondary may get got, but they're fast. They're very, very fast. They're pretty salty up front. They held Oklahoma to 35 carries for 36 yards.
Yeah,
didn't let anybody get anything going. So I was super impressed with Tennessee's defense, and that's always been the question. I think this is the best defense Josh Heupel has had since he's been at Tennessee, and it can certainly get them over the top in some of their biggest games of the year. Yeah,
the defensive lineman rotation is truly insane with what they've been able to do. I know they haven't played much competition this year, but when you look at it, Chattanooga, Kent State, NC State, Oklahoma. Chattanooga averaged the most rushing yards per game at 2.1. Everyone else has been under 2 rushing yards per game, I believe. Let me double check. NC State 1.4. Kent State definitely didn't get over that if I had to guess. 1.7 and then 1.1 against Oklahoma. So the only team that they've played so far that's gotten over 2 yards per carry was Chat in week 1 at 2.1. So defensive line is really, really good. That Tennessee pretty much across the board is top 5 in defense right now. I think in yards allowed per game, rushing yards allowed per game, points per game. They're up there. Now, is it going to get much tougher?
Yeah,
kind of.
I mean, you still have Georgia and Alabama on the schedule.
You have Georgia, yes. It's going to get tougher, but it's outside of Georgia and Bama.
It's easy outside of them, but that feels like that still seems kind of you can't. Georgia and Alabama being on your schedule makes up for anything else. That however easy your SEC schedule is, those 2 losses almost seem built in usual years.
Right. Outside of that, it's Arkansas, Florida, Kentucky, Mississippi State, who looks like one of the worst teams in the entire country, UTEP and Vandy. So Tennessee looks like they will have a chance. It'll probably come down to those 2 games, as you mentioned. Outside of that, the other ranked matchup, USC and Michigan. Do you have any thoughts from this other than just Michigan pounding the ball is really all it was?
Yeah, I have thoughts on the fact that USC probably should have won that game ultimately. Like, it's kind of embarrassing that Alex Orji threw it 12 times for 32 yards.
Yeah.
And you lost a game because Donovan Edwards probably had his best game of the year, even though he still has that great. He had 14 for 74 and a touchdown.
So weird.
Kind of sad to see how bad he is right now.
Weird. Him and Ollie Gordon both expected to be like the top 2 running backs coming into this year. Neither one of them have been impressive at all.
Anything. But yeah, SC, I'm still not done with their hype train. I still think they're a good team. And it's a big takeaway for me is we were concerned about them going into the Big Ten and how that would work because they're soft normally, but they're not as soft as they once were. And I do respect that part about them. But they didn't run the ball at a very high level against Michigan. They gave up too many chunk plays, and that's why you lose a game on the road. But I don't think there's anything to be super ashamed of. First trip to the big house in the Big Ten, you gave a good effort.
Yeah, and last ranked matchup we'll talk about, then we'll move on to the NFL, Utah and Oklahoma State. This one was hyped up as the 7th-year quarterbacks. Both of these quarterbacks are about my age that were supposed to play in this game, Alan Bowman and Cam Rising. Cam Rising, who cannot avoid the injury bug, was not available. And so Zach Wilson's baby brother, Isaac Wilson, takes over at quarterback for Utah, wins the game for the Utes on the road against Oklahoma State. Pretty impressive from Utah, but once again, it kind of goes back to if Cam Rising can't stay healthy, then this team's ceiling is capped.
Well, they could still win the Big 12. Kansas State. I don't know if you watched what Kansas State did against BYU this week. They got absolutely demolished, 38-9. So, it's still there for them, even if you can win a game on the road at Oklahoma State with your backup quarterback. I feel pretty good about where you're at.
It's fair.
Yeah, but hey, Big 12 sort of up in the air, and I do want to add a little +1. Colorado beat Baylor. Did you see the end of that freaking game?
I did. That was quite wild.
They had a chance on the last 2 plays in regulation to get it, except Will Shepard dropped the first one.
Yep.
And then Fedor had to throw another BB, sling one down the field to LaJohntay West, and he caught it.
Yep.
And then Travis Hunter ends it with a forced fumble. He had another 7-catch, 130-yard performance. He had a couple of tackles, a PBU, and a forced fumble to win the game. I'm sorry, and I'm glad people are finally there with me. I've been talking about this the past 2 weeks. If he plays 10 or 11 games, I don't even care if he plays all 12. He needs to be in New York. I don't care. He's the best player in college football right now. He may be on a bad team or a team that's very average at best, but he needs to be in New York. And also on the scale of disgusting, field rushes, rushing the field for freaking Baylor, he should be absolutely ashamed of yourself.
bad.
That is gross. And you came into the game as a favorite. You're
Right.
a favorite at home against
Right.
Baylor, and you rushed the field. And I guess you could give them a little bit of a pass because of how it happened, but I don't give people a pass.
No, you don't get a pass for that.
Baylor is not historic wild program to be rushing the field for.
Nope, not at all. All right, let's transition to topic number 2 and talk NFL Week 3. A lot of upsets this week. Felt like finally, Gabe, it felt like the offense has finally got more of a rhythm this week. It still wasn't perfect, still not kind of the high-flying offense that we're used to. I say that as Buffalo's up 34-3 at halftime against Jacksonville right now, and Josh Allen has 4 touchdowns.
Jags suck, don't they?
They suck. They suck.
They're 0 for their last 7, and Trevor Lawrence is 0 for his last 7, and when he starts a game.
So bad. But let's talk about some of these games. I'll give a couple off the rip. Vikings Texans in the most surprising game of the week, closely followed by Broncos Bucks. Maybe a little bit further behind them, Giants over the Browns, Rams and 49ers. I think this was pretty easily the best week of football that we've had so far. What do you think about Sam Darnold's MVP case as he leads the NFL in touchdown passes through 3 weeks, as we all saw coming?
This next week is the teller for him, isn't it? Because we remember in 2020 when he played for Matt Rule and the Panthers, he had 3 really good games. They started off 3-0, and then they ended the year. They were like 5-11 or 5-12, whatever it was then. So this next week's going to be the teller, and we'll see what it looks like from there. They have the Packers coming up this week in an interdivisional matchup. But Sam Darnold's been playing good ball. It's not a testament to him necessarily, in my opinion. It's more of a testament to Kevin O'Connell and what he's been able to build there.
Yeah.
You get to play action. You have a decent offensive line. You run the ball with Aaron Jones.
Yep.
They just have it going in the right direction. And also, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball. They've been carrying the day as well. Brian Flores has been phenomenal. He's been one of the best DCs in the NFL in the early part of the season.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, you could see this last year with his defense because of Brian Flores. I know there's been a lot of stuff surrounding him and whatever as his exit from Miami as the head coach, but he is one of the best defensive minds in the entire league. There's no doubt about it. I watched a lot of their games last year and a couple this year, and the way that he disguises things and the things that he does.
CJ Stroud came into this game having not thrown a pick in 7 games. He threw 2.
Yeah.
Because he just bothers you. He flip-flops people's assignments in his secondary to make you think you have something that you don't. He's so damn good at controlling the back end of his defense.
Yeah, and then I think I saw a clip last week after they beat the 49ers. So they've literally beat one of, if not the best team in the NFC and one of the best, top 2 or 3 teams in the AFC.
And beat the hell out of them, too. Wasn't even close.
Yeah, it wasn't even close. But I saw a clip last week after the game, and Brock Purdy was talking to Brian Flores, and he was like, dude, your defense is insane. Like, it's impossible to figure out. And it's true. I mean, you never know what he's going to do. So, very impressive there. Broncos Bucks, Gabe, get back on the Bo Nix bandwagon.
No, he didn't even throw a touchdown pass. He still hasn't thrown a touchdown pass in a regular season game.
He ran one.
No. He's ran 2 in this year. But no, I'm not back there. Come on, but I will give the Broncos credit. You go on the road against the team that started off probably the season the best with the best quarterback play in Baker Mayfield, and defensively they did a really good job against him all day. Didn't let them run the ball. It was a defensive game for the Broncos though. I'm not giving that offense too much yet. That offense doesn't deserve too much credit. They just stayed on schedule, played the field position game, settled for a lot of field goals, and won the ball game. That's Sean Payton. That's how he's going to have to win the rest of the year. Now, I have to do something really quick. I'm going to call myself out to a certain extent. Bryce Young got benched last week. They put in Andy Dalton, the Panthers did, and the Panthers went on the road against the Raiders and won 36-22. Andy Dalton he went 26 for 37, 319 yards, 3 TDs, and 0 interceptions at 36 years young. And last week, and I still believe this, I think that Bryce Young's been done a disservice by a bad franchise in the Panthers. I think they're a bad franchise. I think they're poorly run, the whole thing. But last week I was sort of terming it as Bryce Young is a problem. He's not the whole problem.
Yeah.
This week, I sort of changed my tune. He might be the problem.
Yeah.
Because Andy Dalton stepped in and looked like he did early in his career under Marvin Lewis with the Bengals when they were making the playoffs almost every year. I mean, that's what he did.
Who is on that Raiders staff, ironically enough, Marvin Lewis is in some kind of role. Yeah.
There's an advisor or some shit like that.
Yeah, I'm with you because I've been a Bryce Young apologist because I was such a big fan of his coming out of Alabama, wanted him to succeed. Just I think he's shown how good he was at the collegiate level, and everybody gets so worked up about the height and the size and all these things, and so I was very much pro Bryce Young, and kind of like you were, even after he was benched, it was like, yes, he has not developed the way that we might have thought he should have, but he's not the only problem. This is just a trash organization. And then Andy Dalton comes out and throws 3 touchdowns in the first half. I think Deontay Johnson went over 100. Adam Thielen scored a touchdown. The offense looked in sync. Chuba Hubbard went over 100, and I think 30.
He had like 170 of all-purpose yards.
Yeah,
Chuba, really good game.
And we've really been, talking bad about their offensive line, how they can't run block, how they can't pass block. They played well in this game, so it's a strange situation. And they had 4 trade suitors, I think they said, for Bryce Young, and they turned them all down. Which
is what you benched him. You already made him lose his confidence. Let him go somewhere else at this point. I know, but they gave up so much. It's like giving up on that.
Yeah.
Turning the page after you gave up, what was it? First overall pick, DJ Moore, and 3 other picks in the first in day 2. It just doesn't make sense. But final thing that I want to mention: do NFL officials get a memo every week to not call a penalty on the Chiefs in crunch time? Is that they get that memo? Because I don't know. I don't know because. Last week against the Bengals, it was a pass interference. The Bengals got there early on the 4th down. The Chiefs convert. They go down. They win the game. This week, that was a pass interference. They were there early on Kyle Pitts. You got to call that.
Yeah. No, I mean,
you're going to call it on the Bengals last week and call it on the Chiefs in that situation.
Yeah, I agree. That was definitely a pass interference, but I just get so tired of that narrative that it's like, the officials are purposely missing calls so the Chiefs win games.
I don't think they purposefully do.
No.
But damn, sometimes I have to question it. Game 1 against the Ravens was the worst. They called a bunch of illegal formations on Ronnie Stanley, even though the guy on the Chiefs, Jawan Taylor, is the reason they're calling that penalty now.
Hey,
I'm out. Every play.
I'm out. Jawan Taylor was called for it 3 times in that game.
No, not illegal formation. All false start. But he was false starting every play.
It's fair.
They had like 50 offensive plays, and he false started on like 47 of them. They only called 3. That's not a good percentage, brother. I'm sorry.
No,
so I don't know. I obviously don't think refs are doing it on purpose, but sometimes it's just like the team that's the best, the team that is the champion, the team that is the dynasty. They always seem to get a little bit of edge with the referees. The Patriots had it back in the day going in their direction. Chiefs have it now. Just sort of the way of the world.
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it, but I get it in a sense of being frustrated that there are missed calls at the end of the game, but I hate when people will discredit a team because of it. I know you're not doing that. I know you're not saying, the Chiefs aren't good. It's just because of the refs, but there are those people that do that. And if they're 12 –
My favorite people are the social media guys that are like, the NFL is actually not classified as a sport. It's classified as entertainment. They fix it. It's like, just shut it up, please. God dang, man.
Agreed. All right, final topic, Gabe, and then we're going to get out of here. The Memphis Grizzlies announced today that they waived Derrick Rose. So it was not a long marriage this time.
Hey, hold up. Can we call out Kenny from behind the scenes? Derrick Rose Jr.? Do I not know something about Derrick Rose?
I've never seen that one before.
I need the junior out. Let's put it back up, Kenny. Whenever you get a chance. Come on.
I wish we had an explanation on that one. But anyway, Gabe, what were your thoughts on this?
Damn. For those that are listening to the audio and not watching the video, we just had it on our scroll. Damn, because Kenny made a mistake. But what did I think of this? Derrick Rose getting waived? Fine. It makes sense. You need to clear out a spot for somebody who can actually be on the active roster as a backup point guard.
Yeah.
And Derrick Rose clearly can't give you that. One thing that does make me kind of sad is it may be the end of the road. I don't know if we'll get another opportunity. I remember during media days last year, he talked about how bad his body hurt and how it's just becoming harder and harder to maintain.
I think it's time. I think it's
about time for him. But, you clear out a spot. You're going to have to pay him the rest of his guaranteed contract, which it was a vet minimum for 2 years, so whatever. But you clear a spot. For me, the decision I would make is put Scottie Pippen Jr. full-time. Yep. He's still young. He's a really good backup point guard. I think he would be really good replacing Ja Morant with the second team. If you keep him on a two-way, you're only going to be able to play him for 50-some-odd games. So I think having him on the active roster so he can be active for 82 of 82 games is smart. But I have heard this outside thought of Markelle Fultz because he's still out there, signing him. But either way, use that last spot on the roster for a backup point guard heading into the season, because that's my biggest question about this team right now, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. The Derrick Rose stuff is just, kind of from the nostalgic standpoint of it's upset people because of that. But as far as on the floor, I think Scottie Pippen gives you a much better backup point guard than Derrick Rose would have at this point in his career. I hadn't heard the Markelle Fultz stuff until you mentioned it, but I think I would still go with Scottie Pippen Jr. over him. I bet that's why Kenny put the Jr. on there now that we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think Scottie Pippen has shown enough to deserve that opportunity to have that role, and I know Markelle Fultz might grab some people's attention because he was a former number one overall pick. But Scottie Pippen Jr. has been in this system. He knows this system. He knows this team. So I think that's the way to go.
Now let me go full galaxy brain on you. You ready for galaxy brain?
Yeah, whatever that means.
This is galaxy brain, and what I'm thinking, like the reason they let go of Derrick Rose. Why was Derrick Rose brought in the first place? Okay, yeah, maybe you can play a little backup point guard. Cool. But you brought him in to get Ja Morant on the straight and narrow.
Yep.
Ja Morant's now on the straight and narrow, so they're like, we have no need for him anymore.
We're good.
Leader. We're confident with what he's going to put out there. That's my galaxy brain take of the day.
That's a great galaxy brain take, and we'll end it off on that. So we appreciate you guys for joining us this week. If you are watching on YouTube, you can like, subscribe, and comment there. If you're listening to this via Apple, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast, you can do all the same things there. You can also head over to bluffcitymedia.co, check out all the articles, podcasts, and videos on the site. Once again, we appreciate you guys for joining us, and we will see you back here next week.
Thank you for listening to On the Bluff. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. Also, like and subscribe to Bluff City Media's YouTube page. Head over to www.bluffcitymedia.co for comprehensive coverage of Memphis sports and how you can become an insider.